The Wes Penre Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The First Level of Learning. wespenre.com. Metaphysics Section. Metaphysics Paper Number 4, There is a Light at the End of the Tunnel. What Happens After Body Death? By Wes Penre, Tuesday, March 25, 2011. wespenre.com. 1. Abstract. We all, at one time or another, ponder what happens when the body gives up and dies. It happens to us all, but where do we go? Is there a life after death? Without having any proof, many people make up their minds and create a belief system around it, whether it is a religious dogma, a new age, or a philosophical angle. An agnostic there may or may not be an afterlife approach, or the pure atheistic or conservative scientific viewpoint that there is no afterlife. My purpose with this paper is not to discuss any of the above belief systems. I will immediately take the approach that there is an afterlife and that the soul, spirit lives on after body death. There is no doubt about it, and the evidence for that is far more overwhelming than any so-called evidence that there is not. So our discussion will start on that level and bring it further. First of all, what is a credible witness and good research when comes to this subject? A credible witness is someone who is telling a story under hypnosis or during regression therapy by a well-trained hypnotist, regression therapist, and can describe in details what is happening. This story is then backed up by numerous other witnesses, whom have gone through regression therapy by the same or other hypnotists and tell an almost identical story. The session have been recorded and the questions asked by the therapist is in no way leading. Still, the clients, thousands upon thousands of them, are saying basically the same thing. This has been done and I will refer to these kinds of testimonies and consider them evidence. Single witnesses, who recall from trauma or otherwise, what happened after they died. These testimonies, when credible, include deep emotions on the subject, positive or negative, and sometimes an unwillingness to talk about it. The witness has nothing to gain from telling the story, but quite the opposite, they will more likely be looked upon as strange. We have such witnesses as well, and when their stories are coherent, and or the person comes across as honest and sincere, I consider that evidence, too. These witnesses may even have looked for help to interpret their experience. Secondly, what is good research? We have quite a few hypnotists who have hypnotized a large number of witnesses, who all say the same thing, with a few small differences, which can be expected. These hypnotists are professionals, and some of them didn't even believe in past lives until they stumbled upon a client who contacted incidents both, or either, from past lives and, or, the in-between lives area. The hypnotist started exploring the subject and found out that these incidents were real. Perhaps 20 years ago or so, there were not many books written on this subject, but since then, the interest has increased exponentially and there are good books out there now. Some of them are very well researched and don't always coincide with the positive experiences that many people have had between lives. There seems to be a darker side to this as well. This paper will present both sides of the story, separately, and we will end with discussing the two and come to some kind of conclusion. We will start with the more positive experiences. 2. Regression therapy in modern times. A brief background. I would highly recommend that the readers gets the books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton. Dr. Newton is a therapist and hypnotist, whose original purpose was to relieve people from stress and depression with the help of regression therapy, or hypnotism. After a while, he noticed that some clients started going back to previous lives and even into the between lives area, where souls go after they depart from the body after body death. Being a dedicated scientist and an atheist, this came as a shock to him, and he was very skeptical at first. Hence, he asked the subject to be very precise and describe exactly what happened around him, her. He wasn't satisfied until he got some details that could be verified. Eventually, he couldn't deny the obvious anymore, his clients were really experiencing what they were saying. Since then, Dr. Newton has hypnotized more than 7,000 people, whom he has taken back to previous lives and especially, the between lives area, BLA. To his amazement, all these subjects were telling the exact same story, only with their subjective personal experiences differing from each other. Other than that, the stories were absolutely coherent. After a while, Dr. Newton was able to see a pattern and draw a conclusion from that, which built very strong evidence. 7,000 people don't lie, and in particular, they don't tell the same story independently from each other. To get a feel for this and to hear the story in Dr. Newton's own word, here is a very interesting video interview. I am going to concentrate in this section mainly on what Dr. Newton's subjects told him, because the witnesses are so numerous. There are, of course, a lot of other hypnotists out there who are doing a similar great job, and have come to the same conclusions. Some of them are using the same technique. As a matter of fact, regression therapy is nothing new. It took off big time around 1950, when L. Ron Hubbard, later the founder of the Church of Scientology, released his book, Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, which quickly became #1 on New York Times bestseller list and stayed on the list for decades. Hubbard didn't call it regression therapy, but Dianetics, which literally means dia equals, Greek, through and noetics equals the intellect or a pure thought, reasoning. Hubbard translated it as through the mind. With his revolutionary technique, he could have people who had somatic or psychosomatic illnesses to go back in time through chains of events on the same subject until they hit the bottom of the chain, the cause to the problem. Once the cause was found, the whole chain blew and disappeared and the subject found tremendous relief, and sometimes it was a greatly life-enhancing experience. Hubbard and Newton are using a similar technique with the difference that Hubbard didn't hypnotize his clients, they were put in something called reverie, which is a state of slightly lower frequency than being awake, and thus the subject could contact her subconscious mind by being asked questions by an auditor, a person who listens and helps the subject recall. Hubbard's theory was that all problems in present time can be resolved by finding its cause in the past. More often than not, a persistent mental or physical problem has a traumatic source in the past. Dr. Newton seems to have come to a similar conclusion. Just like Dr. Newton, Hubbard did not expect what really happened. People started going past life in his sessions. And some of them went into the BLA as well. Out of his research came expanded Dianetics and the more controversial Church of Scientology. It should be added that Hubbard was heavily attacked by the mental health industry when he presented Dianetics to the field and to the public in the 1950s. His methods were a huge threat to their own business, and there are indications that there were murder attempts against him. However, Dianetics spread like wildfire, and Hubbard probably became too well known to be eliminated. Instead, they chose to ridicule him. I am well aware of that L. Ron Hubbard and his Church of Scientology is a very touchy subject and quite controversial. I do not subscribe to the teachings of the organization as it is today, and don't recommend anybody to join the church, but I have to be fair and tell the truth. Dianetics works. I have tried it myself in the past and it's a working science, because it's not just theory, but can be practiced with the expected results. I have also seen the other side of the coin, which is the present church, in which I was a member between 1985 and 1992. When I joined, Hubbard was still alive. I rapidly moved up the levels and became a new Ot 7 and a Class V auditor in the church. However, after a while, I started noticing the corruption within the organization and what was really going on behind the scenes, and I left and never went back. My opinion is still that the church became heavily corrupted in 1982, when there was a coup against it and it was taken over. Between 1982, until his death in 1986, Hubbard was on the run from the FBI and in hiding most of the time, perhaps also from the new management, which I have reasons to believe is the CIA or Navy intelligence. Another researcher, a non-Scientologist, whom I communicated a lot with some time ago, suggested that Scientology pre-1968 was very interesting and enlightening, but went downhill after that. I am bound to agree, the time frame seems right. There is a lot of valuable information in Hubbard's early lectures and books from the 1950s, like the Philadelphia Doctorate course and the Phoenix lectures to name two. However, one really has to use discernment of plowing through this material to find some gems here and there. Hypnotism, of course, is in itself a much older practice, but I want to mention Hubbard in this train of thoughts as well, because we are going to come back to him later on. 3. The positive version of afterlife. I want to start with summarizing the experiences of Dr. Michael Newton's clients. For more details, I must refer to his excellent books, which all can be ordered at Amazon.com. It is extremely hard, if not impossible, to discard what the subjects are telling the therapist, because the witnesses, unrelated to each other, are stunningly coherent. The exact details of what happens after body death differ from case to case, depending on each person's experiences in life and her advancement, but according to the study, which includes more than 7,000 people, it doesn't matter if the person was religious, an atheist, agnostic, Gnostic, or whatever belief system the person subscribed to in life, the experiences in sitter space, time, space or afterlife, are still very similar. After the soul has departed from the body, one of two basic things normally happens, depending on if the soul is more advanced or less advanced. The lesser advanced soul may stay around for a while, a little confused over being dead and not able to directly communicate with her relatives and friends. These souls may also try to hang on to possessions that were dear to them during their lives and which they now miss. They may also want to stay around to make sure their body is taken well care of, perhaps there was an agreement whether the person should be buried or cremated. The soul may want to make sure that the directions set in life are now carried out. When this category of souls have stayed around for a little while and made sure that everybody is doing relatively well due to the circumstance, the soul normally leaves. Leaving means that it separates from the earth planes and is drawn towards a dark tunnel which seems pretty much like a wormhole or a black hole in space. Quite soon, the soul is being aware of a bright light at the end of the tunnel, and it is moving rapidly towards this light. Many subjects say that there are side tunnels departing from the main tunnel, but I have never heard anybody choosing to go that route. I'm not even sure if it is possible. As the soul gets closer to the light gets bigger and brighter, and the departed soul can normally start distinguishing one or more people standing in the light. First they are vague, but are soon getting clearer. The persons waiting are either old relatives, mothers, fathers, siblings, grandparents, or dear friends, or soulmates, or all of the above. The recently departed soul is greeted by these people, quite an emotional reunion is taking place, and an overwhelming feeling of love and joy is filling up the departed soul. It feels like it wants to stay there forever because of the incredible feeling of oneness with its loved ones. After that, the relatives withdraw and tell the departed soul that it will be assisted in crossing over by its spirit guide and that they will all meet again soon. So they disappear and the spirit guide, who normally was there in the background all the time, but often went unnoticed by the departed soul, due to her focus on the loved ones, now steps forward to help the newcomer. The testimonies are quite coherent when it comes to describing the spirit guide. It may be a male or a female, very loving and helpful, and the departed soul feels like it has reconnected with a very good, old friend, which also seems to be the case because a certain spirit guide is often apparently dedicated to a specific soul. Hence, in most cases, we meet the same guide every time we die. In some cases, subjects under hypnosis are saying that the guide can be mischievous and a bit awkward as well, and in a few cases they have even scared the departed, until they eventually tell the newcomer that it was a joke and it was the appropriate thing to do at the moment. However, these cases are extremely rare. I want to back up here for a moment to describe the journey of a more advanced soul, as Dr. Newton puts it, and how they differ from the less advanced. Instead of hanging around after body death, they usually move on quite quickly, move through the tunnel and meet with a spirit guide. Everything happens quite rapidly, as if this is just some routine that needs to be done rather than that it's actually necessary, and then the soul moves on from there and normally joins path with other souls in its soul group. More about soul groups soon. On some occasions, the very advanced soul doesn't even meet with its guide right away, but knows where to go and travels to its destination immediately, eager to move on. A third category is what Dr. Newton calls the young soul, who hasn't had much experience in the physical world. These souls may be much more attached to people and material things in the physical universe than adult and advanced souls. Therefore, if such a young soul died under trauma or sudden and unexpected circumstances, they may hang around and become ghosts. They refuse to let go of their physical life. Sometimes they may hang around for centuries in terms of linear time, but as time is different in time, space than in space, time, the ghost doesn't consider it being that long. Still, its spirit guide is always trying to reach the lost soul and guide it in the right direction, but sometimes the soul refuses to go anyway, and the guide honors its free will. Sooner or later, the lost soul will normally be released from its trauma and move on and follow the guide. Lastly, Dr. Newton is also mentioning what happens to a soul that has led a violent and criminal life to the extreme. These souls sometimes get separated from the rest after body death. They are so damaged that they can't interact with the other souls, so their spirit guides will take them aside and work with them in some kind of quarantine area, and they will not merge with the others until they are healed. Kevin Williams summarizes pretty neatly what Dr. Newton explains in his series of books regarding wrongdoings and what happens at the end of a life cycle. Because wrongdoing takes so many forms on earth, spiritual instruction and the type of isolation used is varied for each soul. The nature of these variations apparently is evaluated during orientation at the end of each life. The relative time of seclusion and reindoctrination is not consistent either. For instance, I have had reports about maladjusted spirits who have returned back to Earth directly after a period of seclusion in order to expunge themselves as soon as possible by a good incarnated performance. All souls, regardless of experience, eventually arrive at a central port in the spirit world, which I call the staging area. Once past the orientation station, there seems to be no further travel detours for anyone entering this space of the spirit world. Apparently, large numbers of returning souls are conveyed in a spiritual form of mass transit. Spirits are brought in, collected, and then projected out to their proper final destinations, similar to a central terminal of a metropolitan airport that has the capacity to fly people out in any direction. The most outstanding characteristic of this world is a continuous feeling of a powerful mental force directing everything in uncanny harmony. People say this is a place of pure thought. After souls arrive back into their soul groups, they are summoned to appear before a council of elders. While the council is not prosecutorial, they do engage in direct examination of a soul's activities before returning them to their groups. Group placement is determined by soul level. After physical death, a soul's journey back home ends with debarkation into the space reserved for their own colony, as long as they are not a very young soul or isolated for other reasons. The souls represented in these cluster groups are intimate old friends who have the same awareness level. Members of the same cluster group are closely united for all eternity. These tightly knit clusters are often composed of like-minded souls with common objectives which they continually work out with each other. Usually they choose lives together as relatives and close friends during their incarnations on Earth. 3.13 Levels of Soul Groupings. According to the working model, as presented by Life Physics Group California, from the T-boundary, thought boundary, which is surrounding the 7 levels of manifestation, LOM, as fuzzy limit, source is still creating new fragments of itself, which we call souls, information clouds in life physics. Hence, there are souls of all different age, in our terms, so we have young souls, intermediate souls and advanced souls, all depending on how much each soul has had the chance to experience overall in the multiverse, unum. This is being confirmed by Dr. Newton, as we shall see here below. Also, because some clients of Dr. Newton's have been working in the nursery to give birth to new souls, it makes me wonder if the sitter space we are entering after body death is within, or close to the T-boundary. The beginner soul, after have collected and gone through his research over the years and compared the experiences of his clients, Dr. Newton has come to the conclusion that there are 3 levels of soul groupings. The beginner soul is in its turn grouped into 2 subcategories, where the first one the young soul, who hasn't had the chance to incarnate that many times in the physical. Secondly, we have the souls who have been incarnating for quite some time, but still are acting immaturely and haven't developed close to what was expected. The beginner soul sometimes lives a number of lives in relative confusion, having a hard time figuring out the Earth curriculum. They are used to the supportive harmony in time, space. They have a tendency to surrender to the social structure of the planet and more easily fall for propaganda and the functional insanity which is so dominant on our planet. They can be brilliant in some ways, but often lack the compassion for others and are usually self-centered and don't have the ability to think outside the box, or even independently. We have all been in this stage, according to Dr. Newton. The intermediate soul, these souls, who are more mature than the beginner souls, tend not to cluster as much as the first category. This doesn't mean they live in isolation, but they are more independent than the immature souls, and want to develop more separately. Still, they mingle with their own soul group, but not on an as regular basis as the beginners. This category normally don't incarnate as often either. In the beginner's stage, we have a teacher-student relationship to our spirit guide, who normally, as I see it, is our higher selves, or the oversoul. In the case of the intermediate soul, however, it's more like two colleagues working together. We become more and more like teachers of our own, and will eventually come to a point where we can teach others, and act as their spirit guide, while our own spirit guide overlooks our performance. Once we've started teaching, not all souls are able to be teachers, though, but that doesn't stop us from becoming more advanced. We all have different talents and shortcomings, and we decide ourselves, in correlation with our guides, what is best for us to do to develop as a whole spirit/mind/body complex. To understand how this works, we need to think multidimensionally. All of us exist simultaneously on different levels of reality, in different dimensions or densities if you will. Each of us lives several lives at the same time on different planets, because on an ultimate level, there is only one big now. The concept of time is determined by a number of different physical and metaphysical laws and agreements, and is perceived differently depending on our point of view, point of observation. Time, vibration and location in space are the only things which separate our different incarnations from each other, and which normally keeps us from remembering our other selves. Different dimensions, densities, which in themselves are fluid, and quite slippery terms, vibrate on different frequencies. The faster the vibration, the less dense the reality. Therefore, we all have more than one oversoul. Every part of us which vibrates on a higher level than that we can perceive from the frequency band in which we currently operate is our oversoul. Even while incarnated in space, time, we can contact a higher aspect of ourselves for guidance and protection. Also important to understand is that when we incarnate in the physical, we still leave the main part of our energy, soul, in time, space. We only incarnate with as much energy as we estimate as appropriate for a specific incarnation. If we have decided to become athletes, for example, it makes more sense to bring with us more energy than if we choose a life which will mainly consist of sitting behind a desk. This way, we can delegate energy to different simultaneous incarnations proportionally, something that Dr. Newton is pointing out in Destiny of Souls, but also has been independently confirmed by other researchers into this subject. With all this in mind, I hope the relationship in time, space, here defined as the dimension between lives, between discarnate soul, spirit guide, oversoul makes more sense. Once we become more advanced, we are assigned certain responsibilities in time, space which correspond to our abilities and talents. The advanced souls are quite rare on Earth, because as such, we have incarnated amongst other, more advanced civilizations. This makes sense, because there would no longer be any reason to incarnate on a relatively primitive planet like Earth, as there wouldn't be much of a learning experience anymore. These souls are already operating on a conscious, multidimensional level. And like Kevin Williams point out, the advanced soul would unlikely go to a regression therapist to sort out her problems and issues. Before we move on to the next subsection, I'd like to point out that in some cases a soul who just departed doesn't spend much time in time, space at all before it incarnates again, according to interviewed subjects. There are those who remember leaving their body, and quite instantly go into a new incarnation. However, there may be a specific explanation for this, including erased memories and implants, which are parts of a more sinister route through the afterlife, something that will be discussed under Section 4 later in this paper. 3.2 Returning to a new incarnation. When a soul is eventually deciding to return to Earth in a new incarnation, it can be a hard decision for many. According to Dr. Newton's studies, the time spent in the between lives area has been very harmonious and pleasant, and the soul knows that it is going back to a new life of challenges. Still, when ready, almost all souls feel they want to move on and have a new experience in space, time, because there is where we mature and help Source experience itself. Souls know, while in time, space, that this is their purpose. Still, there are a few who decide to stay in time, space, sometimes perhaps forever, and this is accepted, but it seems like these souls are quite rare. Souls, before they reincarnate, have made plans and decisions how they want to live their next life. They have, with help from spirit guides, soul groups and the Council of Elders, more about them below, reevaluated previous incarnations, looked at where they succeeded and where they need to improve. When all that is clear, the soul, which is about to reincarnate, decides when and where on the planet this will happen, which bloodline it wants to incarnate in, and whom else from its soul group it wants to reincarnate with to have the best chance to achieve the goals for that lifetime. More often than not, other members of our soul group reincarnate together with us to play a role in our development, as we do in theirs. These other members may not incarnate at the exact same time as we do, but when appropriate during that lifetime to be of most support. It's almost like we're plotting a movie and then become the actors in it. Before making a final decision, the soul that is about to reincarnate is showed into a room with something which looks like a big control room filled with computer screens and advanced technology. There we are shown different available body types which could possibly suit our mission in the upcoming lifetime. On a screen we can watch a holographic version of a potential lifetime, inhabiting a certain body. Then we go to the next, and the next, until we've seen the potentials of all the available bodies to be able to make our final decision. If the soul, which shows us all this, disagrees with our decision of body choice, it may give final advice, but it seems like it's ultimately up to us to decide which body type we need and want to best accomplish our goals. After have said goodbye to our associates in the spirit world and had a last visit with the Council of Elders, we once again return to Earth, hover around the pregnant woman whom we have decided should be our mother, and at a certain time in the process we enter the body. At the time we're born into the physical, the veil of forgetfulness hits us and we lose our memories of previous incarnations and the spirit world to be able to have a richer experience. Our task is now to figure out what our goals are and as best as we can attempt to accomplish them. It's okay to change our goals as much as we want, no one will stop us, and sometimes that turns out to be good decisions due to unexpected circumstances, and sometimes it's not. A new evaluation next time we enter time, space will determine how well we succeeded. 3.3 The Council of Elders. Dr. Newton says in Destiny of Souls, that the spirit world is a place of order, in contrast to our earthly existence, and the Council of Elders exemplifies justice. It seems like they are not the top source of authority in time, space, but they appear to be the last station of being responsible for souls who are still incarnating on Earth. When I first read about the Council, I had mixed feelings of having such an authority in the spirit world, but according to all subjects whom Newton has hypnotized, the Council can be firm and bluntly honest with us when we are standing before them, but they emit an abundance of compassion and patience for a soul's weaknesses. We will be given a lot of second chances in future lives. However, most lifetimes will have challenges that are at the level of, or slightly above, the capacity for the soul to handle. If that wouldn't be the case, the soul wouldn't learn much. Still, on occasion, it is decided, in council with the soul, that it needs an easier life next time, sometimes due to extreme difficulties in the previous life, and the soul now needs to rest. More often than not, the soul is accompanied by its spirit guide when led before the council. I found out later, as I read more from Destiny of Souls, that Dr. Newton had had the same thoughts. He, too, Was wondering why an authoritarian setting for the council is necessary if this whole afterlife experience is so benevolent? He continues. Why not a simple countryside scene, if they are so full of benevolence? While the younger souls told me that this setting was right and proper for their examinations, the older souls explained that there was a major reason for a domed enclosure. With this design, a higher presence effectively focuses its light energy on the entire proceedings from above. Apparently, we appear before the council right after an incarnation, and also, many say they meet with them just before the next incarnation. The first meeting seems to have the most impact on the soul. The previous life is carefully reviewed during this first meeting, karmic forks in the road are carefully evaluated, and the soul is very aware of things that didn't go as planned, especially if it hurt somebody. Both the positive gains and the mistakes are discussed in depth, while the second meeting, just before rebirth, is much more relaxed, and focuses on what is coming more than the past. Further, Dr. Newton here tells us that our guides are normally escorting us to the meetings with these Ascended Masters. Ascended Masters is an interesting choice of words, and I keep wondering if that was the doctor's choice of words, or if it is commonly used by his subjects. It's hard to know, but it doesn't seem likely that this council are the Ascended Masters whom are channeled by certain people here on Earth. The guide is normally standing in the background during these meetings, being very quiet. The reason for this seems to be because us, her and the soul have already discussed the last life with each other, and now it's time for the evaluation together with the elders. However, the guide interacts when the soul seems confused and uncertain, to clarify and help the soul out, which sometimes can be of quite significant assistance. This is how one of the subjects describes a meeting with the council. The time of my expectation has arrived. I am to see the holy ones. My guide, Lionel, comes and escorts me from my cluster group down a long corridor past other classrooms. We move into another area with a larger hallway that is lined with marble columns. The walls are textured with what looks to be frosted glass panels of many colors. I hear soft choir music and string instruments. The light is a subdued, golden tone. Everything is so relaxing, even sensual, but I am a little apprehensive. We come to an atrium filled with beautiful plants and a bubbling fountain of water. This is the waiting area. After a few moments, Lionel takes me into a round room with a high dome ceiling. There are rays of light shining down. The holy ones are seated at a long crescent-shaped table. I move to the center of the room in front of the table while Lionel stands behind me to my left. The sole purpose, as it seems, of meeting with the council, is to achieve assistance in order to prepare for the next life. Although authoritarian in appearance, the subjects say that the council is benevolent and very helpful in this respect, and not at all a punishment or judgment. The reader may have doubts about this, just as I did, and as Dr. Newton did, but perhaps it is like Dr. Newton figures. He suggests this suspicious mindset we may have is due to our cultural conditioning. He realized that going before the council has many different facets. The elders are like loving but firm parents, managing directors, encouraging teachers and behavioral counselors all rolled into one. What souls feel for their counsel is reverence. Actually, souls themselves are their own severest critics. I find evaluations by our soul group companions to be far more acerbic than any council elder, although our peers do lace their criticism with humor. 9. The souls are telling Dr. Newton that even when they feel nervous before the meeting, this always goes away as soon as they stand before the elders, and that they are made to feel welcome almost at once. The council knows all about us already, including all our past incarnations. We are like an open book to them. However, according to the subjects, when a soul comes before the council, the latter has still not made up their minds about future incarnations. They first want to hear the subject out and find out how the soul feels, and what it feels is the next step in its development. They ask us about our intentions in the past lives, if we were positively or negatively oriented, did we let the body take over, or did we shine through as souls and merge with the body to create a whole? How did we handle power? How did we treat others? They don't seem concerned with how many times we fell down in our progress in life, but if we were able to get up on our feet again and brush ourselves off, or not. Normally, They don't dwell on the most recent lifetime very long, but are more concerned about several lives viewed together to see how the soul is progressing. I want to emphasize here that often, the best progress has been accomplished through tough lifetimes where the challenges have been great and life hard. This kind of lifetime is normally not a coincidence, but something the soul decides to experience in consultation with the elders and the spirit guide to overcome certain barriers that are hard to confront for the soul. This, of course, doesn't mean that each lifetime has to be tough and a struggle. Often, we also need to experience pleasure and very positive challenges to make progress. 3.3.1 The appearance and composition of the council. The council is called the Council of Elders, because the people in it are usually older men. They are often depicted as having bald heads, white hair and sometimes beard, almost like we depict wise men like Merlin and Gandalf here on Earth, apparently. On occasion there are women on the council as well, but according to the subjects, the reason the majority are men is because that's how we look at authority here on Earth. Noteworthy though, is that most subjects are describing time, space events to Dr. Newton which occurred at least a few centuries ago, when authority certainly was almost 100% men. The council is supposed to impact our own experiences and conceptions as a soul from Earth, and whatever creates that symbiosis is what is perceived. Dr. Newton is quite certain that as our culture change, we will see more women on the council. This conclusion is partly based on the fact that more advanced souls, whom have been participating in this study, often see the council members as androgynous. The member may appear either as sexless, or flashing back and forth between male and female. It seems like this is all adjusted accordingly to where the soul is in its progress at the moment. It also suggests to me that the council members may not actually be in the room, but are holograms, which can be manipulated from a distance. If so, the question is, by whom? It could very well be that a hologram is preferred due to all the above reasons, so the right type of council members, with the correct grade of authority and outlook can serve a certain soul. If this is true, there may be a real council whom we never meet, but who sit in the background, in a control room of sorts, and manipulate the hologram. Or, alternatively, something else is going on, upon which we can only speculate. The typical subject sees between 3 to 7 council members. And advanced souls may have from 7 to 12 members on their council. The elders often have silver clothing or deep hues of violet. Almost without exceptions, there's a chairperson sitting in the middle, facing the soul. This elder is the primary questioner and inquirer, and often the same person through a number of lifetimes. The other council members may be exchanged from time to time. Also, other members from our own soul group are appearing before different councils. Why this is, no subject has been able to explain. Hoods, 4 square hats and skulls caps, all having an antiquarian flavor, have often been seen on the elders. Hoods are often thrown back from their heads. It almost reminds me of a religious order, although there is nothing religious about the council otherwise. Interestingly enough, it seems quite common that the council members wear medallions around their necks. Dr. Newton estimates that around 50% of the subject see these medallions on the elders. Around 80% envision a circular design while others may see squares, rectangles, triangles, and star-like designs, some of which are seen in 3 dimensions. The medallions typically hang from a chain or a cord. The purpose of these medallions seems to be to symbolize moments in the soul's life, which were of specific significance. One subject said that an elder wore a medallion showing the embodied soul killing a mountain lion, which symbolized strength and courage. Someone else reported a council woman wearing the swirl design, apparently meaning that we spiral outward in development and will someday return to the source of our origins. When asked who will become a council member, subjects who are more advanced are able to tell Dr. Newton that not everybody is fit to be a member of the council. You first have to be a master teacher. This means you have to perfectly understand other human beings and life forms to be able to guide them. Once you're a council member, you will be able to go inside the soul in front of you. This is what one subject described. What you feel is much more than empathy towards someone who has just come back from a life. You are really in their shoes. The presence gives you the power to feel everything the soul feels at the moment. The prism of light from the presence touches every council member in this way. What this soul said in the above quote is fairly unusual. Normally, the council is the highest spiritual authority the soul will encounter in the astral. When a soul is leaving a council meeting, most have the feeling they were told more about what they did right than what they did wrong. The council knows that the soul has already had a critical meeting with its spirit guide, and it looks like the council always wants to leave the soul in an encouraged state of mind, but still raise its expectations. One soul said what others unsuited as well, that the council had absorbed the soul's self-doubt and cleansed it. What occurs to me when I read Dr. Newton's studies is that it's very much based on souls returning to Earth, reincarnation after reincarnation, to both complete their karmic cycles and to be able to experience what they need to learn, based upon the goals the soul sets for itself, long term. Still, there are souls among Newton's clients who have incarnated now and then on other planets too, but that is more an exception than a rule. The conclusion I make from this is that of course, the ones who decide to start incarnating on other planets won't be the ones sitting in the regression therapist's chair on Earth. They are elsewhere and not accessible for studies like this. What is interesting, though, is that about 7,000 subjects are saying the same thing: we are reincarnating on Earth over and over again, contrary to what LPGC's working model says. See Science Paper Number 2, Known Life Forms Within the Milky Way and Beyond, subsection 3. Still, there is a time when a soul has completed its incarnations on Earth and is ready to move on, according to Dr. Newton. This quote comes from an old, advanced soul nearing the completion of incarnations on Earth. As my session with the council comes to an end, the elders stand and close around me in a circle. Once in position, they raise their arms, outstretched like a giant bird, enfolding me with wings of unification. This is their accolade for a job well done. 3.3.2 The Presence. On the question whether the subjects meet God or not on the other side, the answer is somewhat vague, but almost always positive. We all can feel a greater presence of God in time, space, and it's not the elders. Everybody seems to agree that the elders are not the top of the chain, so to speak. There is a presence above them, which most don't identify as God per se, but something higher than the council. None of the clients wants to use the word God at all, either, when referring to the spirit world, because it has been so abused and personalized here on Earth. They rather call it Source or Oversoul, and it's more of a presence than a being. The general feeling is that we are all part of Source, and at one point in time we will return to Source, just like I and many other researchers into metaphysics have said for years. However, the game of experiences is still going on and will for a long time, so merging with Source does not seem to be in our cards in the near future, in our terms. We are going to continue experiencing the multiverse on an individual basis. The subjects feel there is a higher source that does influence the council meetings, but it's not necessarily the ultimate creator, just someone higher up in the spiritual realm. 3.4 Privacy in a telepathic environment. I am sure many people are wondering if there is any way to keep things private in the spiritual world due to that communication is telepathic. The studies show that privacy is possible, but mostly applied by less advanced souls, who are ashamed, embarrassed, or are feeling guilt about something they did in a previous life. However, the more advanced a soul becomes, privacy becomes more obsolete, and the souls decide that it's no longer important. Quite the contrary, they find it much more educating and healthy to be open with others under all circumstances as long as they dwell in time, space. Each soul has its own unique vibration, and although this vibration is easily readable for other souls, we can choose to withhold certain thoughts unless we want another to enter. 3.5 Between Lives Learning Centers. Just like it's explained in the Urantia book, there are learning centers in time, space, according to Dr. Newton's study cases, even described as classrooms. Outside these classrooms are large assembly halls where souls can socialize and discuss both light and serious matters. This is supposedly a typical description from a subject moving into a classroom setting. My guide takes me into a star-shaped structure and I know this is my place of learning. There is a round-domed central chamber which is empty now. I see corridors going off in opposite directions, and we move her down one of these halls where the classrooms are located. They are offset in such a way that no two classrooms face each other. This is so we will not bother another room of souls. My room is the third cubicle on the left. I never see more than 6 rooms to a hallway. Each room has an average of 8 to 15 souls working at desks. I know this sounds ridiculous, but that's what I see. As I pass down the hall with my guide, I notice in some rooms souls are studying quietly by themselves while others are working in groups of 2 to 5. A different room has the students watching an instructor lecturing at a blackboard. When I enter my room, everyone stops what they were doing and gives me a big smile. Some wave and a few cheer as if they were expecting me. The ones nearest the doorway escort me to a seat and I get ready to participate in the lesson. The whole time I have been gone seems like a brief trip down to the corner grocery store to buy a carton of milk. In addition, there are also different floors, like in a university here on Earth, only that in time, space floors indicates the level of advancement of the soul. Your level of learning is equivalent to how developed we are, and this determines which floor and which classroom to attend. It's nothing intimidating with this. It's like here on Earth, you could be in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade and so on. 3.5.1 The Library of Life Books. One of the first things we do after we enter the spirit world and have met with our spirit guide is to meet and rejoin our soul groups. Here we meet relatives, old friends, and people who have been with us both in space, time and space for a long, long time. Shortly after this reunion, many subjects talk about being in a research library setting. It's Dr. Newton's understanding that we all begin to study our past lives in depth quite instantly. Apparently, this library is huge to say the least, some would say endless. Each soul has its own life book in this library, which we are told to study for better understanding of ourselves. With each lifetime, this book changes, of course, due to new experiences. This gigantic library is almost like a holographic form of the Akashic Records, or the Hall of Records. The structure of the library is rectangular with endless halls leading away from the entry. There are books lined along the walls and many souls are studying at desks, and these souls don't necessarily know each other. Once we enter this room, librarian guides are the archivist souls in charge of all the books. They are quiet, almost monastic in appearance, who assist both guides and students in locating information. Souls may be assisted by the archivist, its own guide, or both, depending on the circumstance. Some souls, upon returning to the spirit world, go alone to the library, while others are accompanied by their guides. I guess this is an individual choice as much as it depends on our level of involvement. Apparently, there are small conference rooms, and the library seems to have tables with a variety of TV-size books, which have 3-dimensional illuminated viewing screens. One client said that the records give the illusion of books with pages, but are sheets of energy which vibrate and form live picture patterns of events. 3.6 Time, Space Nurseries and the Birth of Souls. What was most astonishing to me when I read Dr. Newton's series of books was the part about the nursery. As I mentioned earlier, when souls become more advanced, they will be assigned certain tasks in the spirit world. Some are assigned jobs in the learning centers, while others get to work in the nursery, where new souls are born. I'm going to spend a little time on this section, because it is quite stunning. It certainly seems like the concept of birth is not just something we experience in the physical, it also happens in the spirit world. Souls are born as we speak. Dr. Newton says that it's quite unusual to get clients who can remember their own births as souls. When this happens, it's often younger souls, who don't have a long history, therefore it's easier to remember. Still, even they have only fleeting memories of their own genesis. Destiny of Souls, Chapter 5, starts out with a quote from one of the beginner souls, who have told very similar things. I need to quote in full here to give the reader the idea. My soul was created out of a great irregular cloudy mass. I was expelled as a tiny particle of energy from this intense, pulsating bluish, yellow and white light. The pulsations send out hailstorms of soul matter. Some fall back and are reabsorbed, but I continued outward and was being carried along in a stream with others like me. The next thing I knew, I was in a bright enclosed area with very loving beings taking care of me. I remember being in a nursery of some sort where we were like unhatched eggs in a beehive. When I acquired more awareness, I learned I was in the nursery world of Uras. I don't know how I got there. I was like an egg in embryonic fluid waiting to be fertilized, and I sensed there were many other cells of young lights who were coming awake with me. There was a group of mothers, beautiful and loving, who pierced our membrane sacs and opened us. There were swirling currents of intense, nurturing lights around us, and I could hear music. My awareness began with curiosity. Soon I was taken from Uras and joined other children in a different setting. Now we're going to describe the other side of this coin, the nurses in the nursery, who take care of the newborn souls. They are highly specialized in doing this task and are called incubator mothers. To become one, we have to be very advanced souls, because this task requires perfectionism, or the newborn will not develop as planned. Once again, I need to quote directly, because this is information I haven't seen anywhere else, and still, according to Dr. Newton, he has had several cases who have described the same thing. This soul's name is Sina, and is what Dr. Newton calls a level V soul, which means she is very advanced. N stands for Dr. Newton, who is asking the questions, and S stands for Sina. N, Sina, what has been your most significant experience between your lives? S, without hesitation, I go to the place of hatching, where souls are hatched. I am an incubator mother, a kind of midwife. N, are you telling me you work in a soul nursery? S, brightly, yes, we help the new ones emerge. We facilitate early maturation. By being warm, gentle and caring. We welcome them. N, please explain the surrounds of the place to me. S, gas-like. A honeycomb of cells with swirling currents of energy above. There is intense light. N, when you say honeycomb, I wonder if you means that the nursery has a beehive structure, or what? S, yes. Although the nursery itself is a vast emporium without seeming to be limited by outside dimensions. The new souls have their own incubator cells where they stay until their growth is sufficient to be moved away from the emporium. N, as an incubator mother, when do you first see the new souls? S, we are in the delivery suite, which is a part of the nursery, at one end of the emporium. The newly arrived ones are conveyed as small masses of white energy encased in a God sack. They move slowly in a majestic, orchestrated line of progression toward us. N, from where? S, at our end of the emporium under an archway. The entire wall is filled with a molten mass of high-intensity energy and vitality. It feels as if it's energized by an amazing love force rather than a discernible heat source. The mass pulsates and undulates in a beautiful flowing motion. Its color is like that on the inside of your eyelids if you were to look through closed eyes at the sun on a bright day. N, and from out of this mass you see souls emerge? S, from the mass a swelling begins, never exactly from the same site twice. The swelling increases and pushes outward, becoming a formless bulge. The separation is a wondrous moment. A new soul is born. It's totally alive with an energy and distinctness of its own. Dr. Newton's note, another one of my level verses made this statement about incubation. I see an egg-shaped mass with energy flowing out and back in. When it expands, new soul energy fragments are spawned. When the bulge contracts, I think it pulls back those souls which were not successfully spawned. For some reason these fragments could not make it onto the next step of individuality. N, what do you see beyond the mass, Sina? S, long pause, I see this beatific glow of orange-yellow. There is a violet darkness beyond, but not cold darkness. It is eternity. N, can you tell me more about the line of progression of new souls moving toward you out of the mass? S, out of the fiery orange-yellow the progression is slow as each hatchling emerges from the energy mass. They are conveyed off to various points where mothering souls like myself are positioned. N, how many mothers do you see? S. I can see 5 nearby who, like me are in training. N. What are the responsibilities of an incubator mother? S. We hover around the hatchlings so we can towel dry them after opening their gold sacks. Their progression is slow because this allows us to embrace their tiny energy in a timeless, exquisite fashion. N. What does towel drying mean to you? S. We dry the new soul ''s wet energy, so to speak. I can't really explain all this well in human language. It's a form of hugging new white energy. N. So, now you see basically white energy? S. Yes, and as they come next to us, up close, I see more blue and violet glowing around them. N. Why do you think this is so? S. Pause, then softly, I see now this is an umbilical the genesis cord of energy which connects each one. N. From what you are saying, I get a picture of a long pearl necklace. The souls are the pearls connected in a line. Is this at all accurate? S. Yes, rather like a string of pearls on a silvery conveyor belt. N. Okay, now tell me, when you embrace each new soul, dry them out, does this give them life? S. Reacts quickly, oh, no. Through us, not from us, comes the life force of all-knowing love and knowledge. What we pass on with our vibrations during the drawing of new energy is the essence of a beginning, a hopefulness of future accomplishment. The mother's call it the love hug. This involves instilling thoughts of what they are and what they can become. When we enfold a new soul in a love hug, it infuses this being with our understanding and compassion. N. Let me carry this vibrational hugging one step further. Does each new soul have an individual character at this point? Do you add or subtract from its given identity? S. No, this is in place upon arrival, although the new soul does not yet know who they are. We bring nurturing. We are announcing to the hatchling that it is time to begin. By sparking its energy, we bring to the soul an awareness of its existence. This is the time of the awakening. N. Sina, please help me here. When I think of obstetric nurses in a hospital maternity ward holding and nurturing new human babies, they have no idea what kind of person a baby will turn out to be. Do you function in the same manner, not knowing about the immortal character of these new souls? S. Laughs. We function as nursery caregivers, but this is not a human maternity ward. At the moment we embrace the new ones, we know something of their identity. Their individual patterns become more evident as we unite our energy with them to give them sustenance. This allows us to better utilize our vibrations to activate, to ignite, their awareness. All this is part of their beginning. N. As a trainee, how did you acquire this knowledge of the proper employment of vibrations with new souls? S. This is something new mothers have to learn. If it is not performed properly, the hatchling souls move on not feeling fully ready. Then one of the nursery masters must step in later. N. Can you take me a little further here, Sina? During your love hug, when you first embrace these souls, do you and the mothers discern an organized selection process behind the assignment of the new soul's identity? For instance, could we 10 courageous type souls come through followed by 10 more cautious souls? S. That is so mechanistic. Each soul is unique in its totality of characteristics created by a perfection that I cannot begin to describe. What I can tell you is that no two souls are alike, none, ever. Dr. Newton's note: I have heard from a few other subjects that one of the basic reasons each soul is different from the other is that after the source breaks off energy fragments to create a soul, what is left of the original mass becomes infinitesimally altered, so it is not exactly the same as before. Thus, the source is like a divine mother who would never create twin children. N. Pressing, wanting my subject to correct me, do you think this is a totally random selection? There is no order of characteristics with matched similarities of any kind? You know this to be true? S. Frustrated, how could I know this unless I was a creator? There are souls with similarities and those with none, all in the same batch. The combinations are mixed. As a mother, I can tweak each major trait that I sense that this is why I can tell you no to have exactly the same combinations of character. Well. Subject breaks in to continue. I have the sense that there is a powerful presence on the other side of the archway who is managing things. If there is a key to the energy patterns, we do not need to know of this. Dr. Newton's note: these are the moments I wait for in my sessions, where I try to push open the door to the ultimate source. The door never opens more than a crack. Please tell me what you feel about this presence, about the energy mass which is bringing these new souls to you. Surely, you and other mothers must have thought about the origins of souls here even though you cannot see it? In a whisper, I feel the Creator is close by but may not actually be doing the work of production. Gently, meaning the energy mass may not be the primary creator? Uncomfortable, I think there are others who assist, I don't know. Taking another tack, is it not true, Sina, that there are imperfections to the new souls? If they were created perfect, there would be no reason for them to be created at all by a perfect creator? Doubtfully, everything here seems to be perfection. I temporarily move in another direction. Do you work only with souls coming to Earth? Yes, but they could go to all kinds of places. Only a fraction come to Earth. There are many physical worlds similar to Earth. We call them pleasure worlds and suffering worlds. And do you know when a soul is right for Earth based upon your incarnation experience? Yes, I do. I know that the souls who come to worlds such as Earth need to be strong and resilient because of the pain they have to endure along with the joy. That's my understanding, too. And when these souls become contaminated by the human body, particularly the young ones, this is because they are less than perfect. Might that be true? Well, I suppose, yes. Continuing, which indicates to me that they must work to acquire more substance than they had originally in order to acquire full enlightenment. Would you accept that premise? Long pause, then with a sigh, I think perfection is there with the newly created. Maturity begins by the shattering of innocence with new souls, not because they are originally flawed. Overcoming obstacles makes them stronger, but the acquired imperfections will never be totally erased until all souls are joined together, when incarnation ends. Isn't this going to be difficult with new souls being created all the time to take the place of those ending their incarnations on Earth? This too will end when all people all races, nationalities unite as one. This is why we are sent to places such as Earth to work. So, when the training ends, will the universe we live in die as well? It may die before. It doesn't matter, there are others. Eternity never ends. It is the process which is meaningful because it allows us to savor the experience and express ourselves and to learn 16. So far Dr. Newton. This section in his book continues with some interesting conclusions that he has made from studying cases of new souls. He has grouped them as a list of 4 differences about their existence after they are created. There are energy fragments which appear to return to the energy mass that created them before they even reach the nursery. I do not know the reason for their being aborted. Others, who do reach the nursery, are unable to handle learning to be on an individual basis during early maturation. Later, they are associated with collective functions and, from what I can determine, never leave the spirit world. There are energy fragments who have individual soul essences that are not inclined, or have the necessary mental fabric, to incarnate in physical form on any world. They are often found on mental worlds, and they also appear to move easily between dimensions. There are energy fragments with individual soul essences who incarnate only on physical worlds. These souls may well receive training in the spirit world with mental spheres between lives. I do not find them as interdimensional travelers. There are energy fragments who are souls with the ability and inclination to incarnate and function as individuals in all types of physical and mental environments. This does not necessarily give them more or less enlightenment than other soul types. However, Their wide range of practical experience positions them for many specialization opportunities and assignments of responsibility. 17. Common for all newborn souls, it seems, is that they start out on a gradient. They are not immediately thrown down to the hungry wolves on planets like Earth and are expected to survive. Instead, they are practicing on mental worlds first, without biological life. These worlds are only semi-physical, as a light form. None of these very young souls are yet part of any soul group, but several souls are sent to these worlds at the same time, without necessarily knowing about each other. They meet each other in this reality and often browse these worlds together, just to have fun. This way they also learn to communicate with each other and how to live in communities. They have no responsibilities and can do whatever they want in these holographic worlds, especially created for this purpose. Not until each soul feels comfortable in these worlds can they move on to the next step in their learning process and eventually incarnate on Earth or other planets. 3.7 The meaning of life. The ultimate question, I guess, when you are in Dr. Newton's position and able to ask the subjects anything you want, is what is the meaning of life and what source, God, really is. Of course, the subjects may only be able to answer this up to their certain level of experience, but it's obviously a great opportunity to ask. Dr. Newton tried to get these questions answered by addressing them from many different angles, and the following is a sum up of sorts on what the subjects told him. The reason for existence. The ultimate objective of souls is to seek unification with the supreme source of creative energy. To explore and experience life in the physical in different dimensions and universes. Universes are created to live and die for the use of the source. However, souls never die. Our collective wisdom makes the source stronger. To be given life so we can arrive at a state of perfection, the source creates for fulfillment of itself. It desires to express itself through us, by birthing. What is source? The source is the spiritual world. The source is the ultimate selfless being which we strive to be. In the beginning there is an outward migration of our soul energy from the source. Afterward, our lives are spent moving inward, toward cohesion and the uniting. The source pulsates. It's like we all are inside of a beating heart. It's like if souls are all part of a massive electrical explosion which produces a halo effect. In this circular halo is a dark purple light which flares out, lightening to a whiteness at the edges. Our awareness begins at the edges of brilliant light, and as we grow we become more engulfed in the darker light, full of knowing presence which is everywhere for us, and alive. 3.8 A few additional selected quotes from Dr. Newton's subjects. Death is like waking up after a long sleep where you had just a muddled awareness. The release you feel is one that comes after crying, only here you are not crying. Destiny of Souls, p. 49. Amnesia forces us to go into the testing area of the laboratory of Earth without the answers for the tasks we were sent here to accomplish. Destiny of Souls, p. 117. The ability of a soul to unite with itself is a natural process of energy regeneration after physical death. Destiny of Souls, p. 117. Thus, it is not the volume of energy which gives potency to the soul but the quality of vibrational power representing a soul's experience and wisdom. Destiny of Souls, p. 117. Even primary soulmates killed at the same moment will normally rise up by separate routes on their own vibrational lines. Each soul requires their own rate of ascension, which includes orientation stops and energy rejuvenation, even if they are returning to the same soul group. Destiny of Souls, p. 271. And with this we are leaving Dr. Newton and his subject for now. I have personally read 3 of his books, Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls and Memories of the afterlife, and I must say that his research is pretty convincing and also aligns with my own and many other people's research, not only pertaining to the spirit world, but into metaphysics in general. It fits well into the puzzle, almost to the smallest detail. I am now going to present a darker side of the afterlife, which seems to be much less common, but still appear to exist. Hence, I feel the need to present it to give a fuller picture. After that, we are going to conclude both sides of the story and comment on certain things that seem important. 4. The negative version of afterlife. A year ago or so, I was finding a lot of conflicting data regarding the spirit world and what happens to us after our physical bodies die. There was a very disturbing side of it, too, and I decided to do my best to sort this out. Although Dr. Newton's research is pretty solid, and this is what his subjects have experienced, are there others who have experienced something darker? On September 23, 2010, I wrote an article called, "The Afterlife Programming," which is now taken down and replaced by this section. I will repeat some of the information I released then, and add more to it. In that article, I argued that we are stuck in a third-dimensional, density prison and the astral plane, time, space, is a part of it. I concluded that the spirit world is just a rest area for the soul, fully loaded with holograms, implants and computer screens which create a reality for us that is perceived as pleasant and beautiful. I said that this pleasant environment is created to deceive us, to make us believe that the third dimension is not a prison, but a place to evolve. I also asked the rhetoric question, who are the Council of Elders? Could it be that they are part of a much larger control system, and they are just the ones making sure that business goes on as usual in the astral world and to make certain that no one escapes? Are we then implanted with false memories, amnesia implants and shot down into a human body again? These are very dark and depressing assumptions, indeed, and if I made this up from out of the blue, I would be very concerned about my mental health. But no, there are actually those who suggest that the above is true and what is truly happening when we die. I am going to tell the reader my sources and describe briefly what they are telling us, and afterwards we are going to discuss their credibility. 4.1 The Wingmakers Theory. The first source is James of the Wingmakers. In 2008, he accepted to do a rare interview with Carrie Cassidy and Bill Ryan of former Project Camelot, now Project Camelot portal. The interview can be read in full here, projectcamelot.org web link. James did this interview, partly to promote his most recent website, sovereignintegral.org. Project Camelot had a lot of dedicated followers, providing a lot of new information, previously not covered at wingmakers.com. James also presented some quite disturbing information. In short, please read the article. He said that the whole third dimension is a trap set up by the very powerful God, Anu of the Anunnaki. He and his people genetically manipulated already existing beings of lower consciousness here on Earth and implanted them with a veil of forgetfulness and a body/mind system which would keep the spirit trapped in the third dimension forever, or until Anu breaks the spell. Why and how did he do this, according to James? Apparently, Atlantis, the ancient mythical civilization which Plato and others were describing, existed thousands of years ago, and was destroyed around 9500 BC, was interdimensional to begin with, and inhabited by free spirits that were highly multidimensional. Atlantis was a beautiful, and very spiritual place, and the souls who built it here on Earth were very playful, innocent and in certain terms, naive. Anu, who wanted to play God and was a very power-hungry and smart being, mingled with the Atlanteans, noticed their free spirit, and decided to trap them. So he created solid, physical bodies which he programmed to only be able to perceive a certain small frequency range of light and sound, the current 3D range, and would thus be separated from the rest of the multiverse. In addition, he actually created a clone universe with stars, planets, galaxies, nebulae and all the rest of it, which were as solid as the real space/time universe, except the only beings inhabiting this clone universe were humans. In other words, he successively created his own version of bodies based on the human template, one head, two arms, bipedal, and seeded his own universe with these bodies. According to James, 3D is only existing as a creation of Anu, The real universe is a multiverse with multiple dimensions which interact with each other to enable its multidimensional inhabitants to have as rich experiences as possible. Now, Anu wanted to trap these free spirits of Atlantis into the three-dimensional bodies to lower their frequency and make them his slaves. How could he do that? Why would free spirits even consider entering solid bodies with such great limitations? For Anu, the answer was easy. He simply programmed the bodies with images and 3D movies. He created something most easily described as a CD running in a constant loop, showing attractive pictures and realities that would interest a curious, naive spirit. Then, he chose a few souls and talked them into testing his bodies. His guinea pigs were probably reluctant at first, but at the same time curious, and Anu was apparently quite glib and convincing and managed to have a few spirits try the bodies. Due to the fascinating experience, the test subjects told the rest that this was very fun and interesting, and most of the remaining spirits entered the bodies as well. At that point, Anu closed the trap. Since then, we have been trapped in the third dimension, looking up at a universe which is a clone of the real one, sparse of life, and only seeded with biominds, biokinds whom Anu created. Because as soon as he was done with Earth, he went elsewhere and trapped other beings in other parts of the universe and had them entering his bodies as well. Anu now felt like he was becoming greater or equal to God, because he could create his own, whole universe and put himself in charge over it. Anu also knew that to be able to keep these spirits trapped, he needed to create a time, space where the spirits could go after their bodies perished. So he did, he created a whole time, space environment of holograms, implant stations, spirit guides, landscapes and everything we can think of. Here the spirit could rest for a while before its memories of the spirit world was erased and then the bodies were shot down into a 3D body again. In this fashion, the reincarnation cycle has continued for tens of thousands of years. In addition, the whole clone universe is existing like a time loop, so after a certain amount of time, it restarts itself over and over again, just like a CD would, if you put it on repeat. According to James, the end of such a loop is happening soon, within the next 3 generations. That's why it is important for mankind to find what he calls the Grand Portal, which is an allegory for being aware as a whole humanity that we are spiritual beings and can prove scientifically that this is the case. When science and religion meet, we can break the spell and so also the walls of the third dimension, we would be free spirits again and part of the richness of the multiverse. Furthermore, James says that Anu is no longer here, and that Nibiru, which is the planet of the Anunnaki, is no longer a threat. The spirit world has apparently become an automatic process, and does not need Anu's attention. Prophecies are talking about the gods coming back in the end times, which is supposedly now, and these prophecies basically talk about the same gods, which is Anu and the Anunnaki. However, plans have been changed, as James put it, and Anu is not coming back. This is apparently the good news, and we're left on our own to figure out how to get out of the trap. This is where James and his lyricist teaching order come into the picture, to help us find the Grand Portal. 4.2 The Moon Matrix. David is another researcher who has come to a somewhat similar conclusion as James, only the details differ. He, too, is of the conviction that we started out as free spirits and got trapped here in 3D. His research also digs into the Anunnaki past and current presence on Earth, genetic engineering, and entrapment through DNA/RNA alteration. However, while James and others, who have had real encounters with the Anunnaki, I've been in contact with these contactees. His main theory, here extremely simplified, is that the global elite, working behind the scenes to control our reality and keep us trapped here, are possessed by, or taken over by reptilian ETs called the Anunnaki. The reptilians are from the lower fourth density dimension and can't comfortably stay for long in our reality without drinking human blood. The blood is keeping them grounded here for a while through vibration, hence the satanic, black magic blood rituals that are reported to take place around the globe in elite circles. The global elite believe they are of a pure bloodline, going back to Old Babylon, Sumer and even further back, a direct line to the reptilian fourth density entities, who interbred with humans. By keeping their bloodline as pure as possible through inbreeding, they are able to function as hosts for these higher density reptilians. In exchange for doing their dirty work, they can live a life in abundance, and more or less get whatever they want when it comes to material things and certain spiritual powers. The goal of the reptilians is to completely take over the earth as the conquering race they are. Hence, they are slowly, but surely, more rapidly now, building a new world order to establish themselves as gods in a human slave society where we will all be implanted with microchips from birth, and our thoughts will be manipulated by ELF, extremely low frequency, waves so that we can no longer think for ourselves. All our thoughts will be controlled, and we will think they are our own. In other words, we are heading towards a society which would make George Orwell's 1984 look like a vacation trip to Greece. We are becoming the ultimate slaves, and these beings are very close to accomplishing their goal. However, by waking up the masses via the internet, books, lectures and spiritual work which raise our frequencies, we can affect other people around us positively, and hopefully sooner than later, raise the frequency of enough people to be able to stop this dark agenda, which has been going on for thousands of years. In most of his later books, is talking about that we are stuck in a time loop. He actually wrote a whole book about it, Tales from the Time Loop, 2003. He also elaborates on this in his latest book, Human Race Get Off Your Knees The Lion Sleeps No More, 2010. Where he makes a good job comparing his time loop theory with that of how a DVD works. We watch a movie on DVD, usually from beginning to end, and it tells a story. We are actually all actors in this movie, which is quite predestined, but we can interact to some degree and change things in the movie if we are spiritually aware enough to be able to do so. If not, we're running on a script, a program, which we have little control over. Time in 3D is like this movie. You can fast forward or rewind the DVD to a certain point in the plot and start watching from there. Thus, you have a past, a present and a future. However, most people are not aware of that they are playing out a script. The originators of this movie are the reptilians, who can watch the 3D plot from outside, just like we sit in the living room watching a DVD, as above, so below. According to K, we thus live in a giant hologram, in a movie which starts all over once it has finished. And we are getting close to the end of the movie now. This is also how prophecy works. Entities from outside the DVD, time loop are entering the movie and give us predictions about future events that are most likely to come true, because they are written into the plot. So how do the reptilians do this? Well, again according to K and the research he has done, it's all controlled from the artificial moon. This is where their control room is, where they direct their holographic technology towards Earth, and keep us trapped. The moon, however, is just a relay station, and the real programming seems to come from the planet Saturn, according to K and his latest discoveries. This is the extremely short version of K's research, and I recommend you read his books to get a bigger picture because I can't make justice to it here. Although I haven't really seen K mentioning it, it is easy to expand on his theory, the moon matrix, if we want to take it to heart and are curious about what happens after we die. If K is correct, it's not a stretch to imagine that the spirit world and the time, space we go to between lives is another DVD, which is playing over and over. 4.3 liters. Ron Hubbard and the Afterlife Implant Stations. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Dianetics and Scientology, was probably the first out with information about between lives implant stations and erasure of memory. In many ways he was a pioneer and revealed things which to many seemed ridiculous at the time, but later was found to hold water, and some of what we now perceive as truth originated from him. With that said, I also want to emphasize that he was certainly not always right, and some of the stuff seems very dated and invalid today. But like with most researchers, even those who have proven to be disinformation agents, there is always some good information to discover. I try never to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Hubbard talked about the between lives area on several occasions, but this excerpt from his book A History of Man, 1952, originally released as what to audit sums up Hubbard's version pretty well. Of course, Not many people know the nomenclature of Scientology, so here are some definitions which might help the reader understand the quote that follows. Preclear, a person who is under Scientology processing, working him, herself up to the state of clear, which is a certain level when the person is free from his, her reactive mind, which is normally running our lives. A clear is someone whom, after certain levels of training and auditing, can make more rational decisions without being affected by his, her past reactions to situations. Auditing, when a preclear is in session, normally with an auditor, one who listens, and go through certain preset procedures which will eventually make the preclear clear. Except in certain Dianetics procedures, an e-meter, electrometer, is used to detect reactions to certain questions asked by the auditor. It works similar to a lie detector. Restimulation, when a past, often traumatic, or negative incident is triggered in a person, and he reacts to something happening in the present as if it was the same incident in the past. Earlier events' effect is today, and we are often not aware of that this is the case. Mist, matter, energy, space, and time. This is the Scientology term for the physical universe. The Eta being, Scientology term for soul, spirit. Bank, term for memory bank, or more specifically, the context of the reactive mind, which is the mind that is addressed in Dianetics, the mind containing hidden memories from traumatic incidents in the past. When the reactive mind is erased, the preclear becomes clear. Keys in, keying in, a moment of trauma, stemming from the reactive mind, gets in rest stimulation and the person experiences negative emotions, sometimes pain, or any emotion reaction which is contained in the bank, relating to the incident that was keyed in. Overt act, destructive act towards oneself or others, also including material things, animals and plants, the physical universe or the soul of self or others. Track, or time track, the linear time of the genetic entity, which is the body. Facsimiles, mental image pictures. To run, this means to process or to audit, see auditing above. Here is L. Ron Hubbard. Between lives, at death the theta being leaves the body and goes to the between lives area. Here he reports in, is given a strong forgetter implant and is then shot down to a body just before it is born. At least that is the way the old invader in the Earth area was operating. The implant is very interesting. The preclear is seated before a wheel which contains numbers of pictures. As the wheel turns, these pictures go away from him. He is moved aside to the right, the left, the back. A mirror arrangement shows him still sitting there before the pictures. A force screen hits him through the pictures. The pictures dim out. The whole effect is to give him the impression that he has no past life, that he is no longer the same identity, that his memory has been erased. The force screen flattens his own vitality, thus invalidating his existence, thus installing, by force alone, a forgetter. The pictures, by the way, are simply generalized views, stills of vacant lots, houses, backyards, of a recent Earth period, and they could apply to anybody. They are not the facsimiles of the preclear. The incident contains such force that the preclear at first quite closely in contact runs it willingly. As the force cuts down his past identity he begins to disbelieve the incident, then himself. If left in rest stimulation he has a difficult time remembering things for some days. Gradually through a lifetime this between lives incident keys in. At first it engulfs childhood, then later and later years. Finally, with age, the preclear starts to cycle through it automatically and goes into a second childhood, which is to say, he anticipates the coming implant, conceives it to have done if he lives beyond a normal lifespan for him. If it usually happened that he died at 60, should he now live to 70, he will get a feeling in the last 10 years that it has been done to him, a routine time rest stimulation effect. Preclears do not always report. To have been implanted once is to get a rest stimulation on dying which will wipe out the past life. Some preclears have 1, some have 5, some more of these implants. The life-to-life forgetter would follow as a natural course of events from the fact that the preclear identifies himself and is identified by others as a messed body. Further, he identifies everyone else as a messed body. Also, he would rather start, if he must be a messed body, with a clean slate and a new body. Also he has many overt acts of convincing others they should forget their entire pasts, for by that he can train them for a better future for him. No implant would ever succeed unless there was a natural cause and reason for the implant to magnify. The report area for most has been Mars. Some women report to stations elsewhere in the solar system. There are occasional incidents about Earth report stations. The report stations are protected by screens. The last Martian report station on Earth was established in the Pyrenees. Entities have between life incidents independent of the thing. These are not necessary to run. There are many types of between lives earlier on the track, about 10 different periods of the entire track being devoted to a practice of keeping a thing in a body, working and in an area. These show up as second facsimiles and are not necessary to run. But the data is there in the secondary banks and it is very wonderful data on how to keep races enslaved. 4.4 Robert Morningsky and the Terra Papers is a quite well-known researcher. He wrote the Terra Papers. Robert Morningsky in the mid-part of the 1990s, which deals with the history of Earth, humankind and what happened in Sector 9, our part of the universe, before Earth was born and inhabited. Morningsky is half Hopi, half Apache Indian, and according to his own story, his Hopi grandfather told him the story of a star visitor, who crash-landed on Hopi land, and the alien survived the crash and was taken care of by the Indian tribe. In return, the star visitor told the Hopis the story of planet Earth. He told them about the Anunnaki from Sirius, their war with the reptilian queens from Orion, how a peace treaty between the Sirians and the Orion reptilians were eventually made, and the Sirians explored and started inhabiting our young solar system. However, the Anunnaki, being a warrior race, constantly fought internally, especially over who was going to be their king. Son killed father, nephew overthrew uncle, etc. In an endless struggle for power, Morningsky did his own research based on what the star visitor told the tribe. The result became the Terra Papers. The author writes about how Enki and Ninhur Sag of the Anunnaki created the human race, quite similar to what the late Zechariah Sitchin told us in the Earth Chronicles. Morningsky's story goes that the Greys is a hybrid race, created by mixing reptilian and humanoid DNA from the Orions and the Sirians and manipulating the DNA. The Grey hybrid race later on became the head of the Freemasons and are still up until this day, behind the scenes. They were also the ones who helped Marduk, Enki's son, to power in Old Babylon. The reason I am bringing up Robert Morningsky in this context is because of the Shit-U lizards, the Greys. Robert held quite a few lectures after the Terra Papers were released, and at least one of them still exists online and can be watched on YouTube. In one of these video recordings, Morningsky says that the Greys are in charge of the spirit world and are implanting us between lives. Furthermore, he advises us that when we die and our spirits are drawn towards the tunnel, we should refuse to go there and instead turn the other way, out into the universe, where we belong. Here are the two-part of the lecture which includes these statements. Point 5 Edgar Cases and other people's experiences in the spirit world. The famous medium, Edgar Case, traveled through the tunnel to the spirit world more than once. When he did, he noticed strange creatures inhabiting the various afterlife realms he passed through. In the first realm, there were horrible, vague, and grotesque forms similar to those you encounter in a nightmare. On all sides of the tunnel he could see misshapen forms of humans with some body part magnified. Some people were also calling out for him, asking for help and trying to get his attention. This experience that Case had is also described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead and other religious scriptures as being hell. It's a place where a particular desire has been overemphasized while in physical life. There are others, besides Edgar Case, who have come back from being dead for a short time and after been revived. They speak of similar things. Some of them actually describe being in a hell of fire and brimstone. Interestingly enough, and we will discuss this later, many people who say they have been to the classic biblical hell are either religious people in general, or reverends. Arthur Jensen, a university graduate in geology, had quite a few near-death experiences in the earlier part of the 1900s. Just like Case and many others, he said he had experienced something called the void, where there is only darkness, no light, no love. Only thoughts exist of self and others. The general idea seems to be that this void is where souls go who are too low in vibration to mingle with the average souls after body death. The void has many names in different religions, where some of them are purgatory, hell, outer darkness, prison, Jehannam, Sheol, pit, abyss, and Nar, and Pritaloka. This is what Jensen had to say about the void. Those who are too bad go to a realm of lower vibrations where their kind of thoughts can live. After death, people are drawn into groups according to their rate of soul vibrations. If the amount of discord within a person is small, it can be eliminated by God so that only the good remains and they are welcomed into heaven. However, if the amount of discord is too high, eliminating it cannot be done because they would be annihilated. So, the person will gravitate to a lower realm and live with their own kind. Each person lives in the kind of a heaven or hell that they have prepared for themselves while on earth. High vibrations indicate love and spiritual development, while low vibrations indicate debasement and evil. Without a physical body, feelings of hate and fear are intensified as souls vainly try to hide from their enemies. Interestingly enough, Jensen was asked on occasion, due to his experiences, what God is like, and like so many others have described God, Jensen said. Under self-hypnosis, I once asked what God was like. I saw a huge mountain almost covered with clouds. Here and there were small peepholes through which I could see lightning and great activity. Then a voice from somewhere said, to fully understand God, you'll have to be almost as great as God is. This put me in my place. But for reasoning purposes I had to have some kind of a mental image of what God is like. To me now, after many years of thought, He's a combination of many things such as, the known and unknown laws of nature, light, electricity, gravity, time, space, infinity, love and life itself, totally incomprehensible. But since we have life, we must all be a small part of Him. That's probably why we call Him Father and consider ourselves His ornery kids, who always need forgiveness. Jensen comes across as a religious person, but his experiences changed him. Still, he tried to box them into his old belief system, and that's where it becomes arbitrary. To return to case for a while, he was also famous for finding information on the Hall of Records, the Akashic Records, while in trance, and what he had to say corresponds a whole lot with what Dr. Newton's subjects said. As I pass on, there is more light and movement in what appear to be normal cities and towns. With the growth of movement I become conscious of sounds, at first indistinct tremblings, then music, laughter, and singing of birds. There is more and more light, the colors become very beautiful, and there is the sound of wonderful music. The houses are left behind, ahead there is only a blending of sound and color. Quite suddenly I come upon a hall of records. It is a hall without walls, without ceiling, but I am conscious of seeing an old man who hands me a large book, a record of the individual for whom I seek information. A good description of the temple of knowledge that people refer to in other NDEs. Kevin Williams is a person who has done a lot of research into the afterlife phenomenon, and he's got an explanation for the void that I agree with, and which corresponds pretty well with Dr. Newton's research. After death, some souls travel very quickly through the two lower realms, the earthbound realm and void, by means of the tunnel and onto higher realms. Other souls, particularly those who have developed a strong addiction for some earthly desire that went beyond the physical and into the spiritual, may enter the earthbound realm in a vain attempt to re-enter Earth. Many near-death accounts, as you will see later, involve souls entering the void immediately after death. From here, the soul may then enter the tunnel toward the light in the next heavenly realm. Other souls remain in the void for one reason or another until they are ready to leave it. The general consensus among near-death reports is that the void is totally devoid of love, light, and everything. It is a realm of complete and profound darkness where nothing exists but the thought patterns of those in it. It is a perfect place for souls to examine their own mind, contemplate their recent earth experience, and decide where they want to go next. For some souls, the void is a beautiful and heavenly experience because, in the absence of all else, they are able to perfectly see the love and light they have cultivated within themselves. For other souls, The void is a terrifying and horrible hell because, in the absence of everything, they are able to perfectly see within themselves the lack of love and light they have cultivated within themselves. For this reason, the void is more than a place for the reflection of the soul. For some souls, it is a place for purification. In the latter case, the void acts as a kind of timeout where troubled souls remain until they choose a different course of action. For some souls, the time spent in the void may feel like only a moment. For others, it may seem like eternity. This is because the way to escape the void is to choose love and light over the darkness. Once this happens, the light appears and the tunnel takes them toward the light and into heaven for further instruction. For those souls who either refuse the light or have spent a lifetime ignoring the light, it may take what seems like eons of time before they reach the point that they desire the light of love. The problem for many souls is that they prefer the darkness rather than the light for one reason or another. For some of these souls, their only hope is reincarnation. This is because it is not possible for any soul to be confined in the earthbound and void realms forever. God is infinitely merciful and would never abandon anyone to their own spiritual agony for too long. However, God allows souls to remain there only as long as it suits their spiritual growth. The void is not punishment. It is the perfect place for all souls to see themselves and to purge themselves from all illusions. For those souls who are too self-absorbed in their own misery to see the light, there are a multitude of beings of light nearby to help them when they freely chose to seek them. The nature of love and light is such that it cannot be forced upon people who don't want it. Choosing love, light over darkness is the key to being freed from the void. The moment the choice is made, the light and tunnel appears and the soul is drawn into the light. Some of Dr. Newton's subjects explain how they come to the spirit world as extremely damaged souls. This could be due to having done a lot of evil against others, been a subject to a lot of harm done to them, or they have lived a very destructive life with drugs, suicide attempts, and some of these damaged souls are thereafter have committed suicide. Instead to letting a damaged soul mingle with the rest of its soul group and other discarnate, they are going to a solitary place where they can heal. It's usually a dark place where they can be by themselves, but still get assistance from their guides when needed. Of course, here where they can ponder and conclude it could be a scary place at first for some people, because they have to face themselves to be able to see what they have done to themselves and others, in an attempt to turn the wheel around and start going in the other direction. It is my own belief that this is another description of the void. We can clearly see by reading the negative experiences in this section 4, that even when something is as consistent as Dr. Newton's research, there are always those who have had other experiences which at least after a first glance don't seem to fit into the mold. Or do they? In the conclusion section below, we are going to discuss just that. 5. Conclusions. Before we come to a final conclusion, let's examine the above sections one by one. 5.1 Dr. Michael Newton Revisited. After have read Dr. Newton's complete library, it's very hard to discard his research. 7,000 plus subjects is pretty impressive, and if they also all tell you the exact same thing with only some minor personal details differing, I would call that evidence. It sure looks like this is the norm, at least this is what is happening to most of us when we depart from our bodies. One thing with Dr. Newton's cases is that they state that most of the time we reincarnate over and over here on Earth, until we've learned our experience, become a more advanced soul and can go on to the next level, or incarnate on another world to expand ourselves further. This contradicts Dr. Borden in the working model of the LPGC, which postulates that once we're incarnated on any planet, in this case Earth, our information cloud, soul, is getting indexed to this particular planet, and when we exit, we can't come back, because we're already indexed here and have done our job. It doesn't matter if we died as little babies, we have no way of coming back other than as visitors or walk-ins. I discussed this matter with Dr. Borden, and he is absolutely positive that the latter is true. He says that the multiverse is so vast, and there is so much that we need to learn, that we only have one incarnation on each planet. I disagree with this, like I said in a science paper, and when I tried to push the matter further recently, I never got a reply. Aside from all the positive information we have received from Dr. Newton and his research, there is this nagging feeling in the back of my head that something is not completely right. Almost all of the 7,000 clients have told about a similar, almost euphoric experience in the spirit world, but at the same time, it all seems almost too structured and controlled. It sounds like somebody is controlling the between lives area notoriously. This does not in itself have to be a negative thing, but the fact that the spirit guides are always present in the room when Dr. Newton is interviewing his clients under hypnosis also made me wonder. Again, it does not have to mean anything negative, but what if the spirit guides during the sessions are holographically manipulating the clients and have them tell only parts of the real story, or a modified version to hide what is really happening? It's easy to get paranoid here, but I want to be open to all options. One can also speculate in the validity of that the client's claim to incarnate over and over on Earth are implanted memories as well, if the last paragraph holds any validity. But there are many other sources indicating that we actually do live more than one lifetime on Earth simultaneously. The interesting thing is that some of Dr. Newton's clients say that they don't necessarily reincarnate into a future body, but rather into a body anytime and anywhere, depending on what that spirit needs to learn and experience. This is in line with my own research, and I will talk more about this in the solution papers. Whatever the matter is, we need to keep in mind that we have gone through the afterlife process over and over and we are still here, so whatever the case is, we come out of it in one piece, and mostly it seems to be quite a pleasant experience, whether we're controlled or not. More than likely, there is more to come on this subject in the near future. Additional papers on this topic can be expected. 5.2 The Wingmaker's Theory Revisited. When I first started looking into the Wingmaker's material, WMM, I was pretty fascinated. I read the Dr. Neruda interviews and the Ancient Arrow Project and knew in my heart that there was a lot of truth in this. Afterwards, I have had parts of that information confirmed to me. The ASHO, the Advanced Alien Contact Intelligence Organization, is a real group and a part of the NSA, National Security Agency, and has its headquarters in remote Pine Gap, Australia. I know firsthand that they exist, because I have had correspondence with them. When I started reading more from the Wingmaker's site, I noticed it changed in character somewhere along 2001 or so. The information that was released after that, including FAQ pages, audio interviews, and articles, was in general more questionable and the context no longer as inspiring as before. Suddenly James, the translator of this material and the main person behind the information, started adding information about the Great White Brotherhood, Alice Bailey, Ascended Masters and other quite esoteric material which seemed out of place for me, and a way to sidetrack us, especially as I understand that the Great White Brotherhood and their Ascended Masters program is set up by those who are not from here and don't have our best interests in mind. Much more about this later on. However, I was still hooked due to that there was still some information, like the energetic heart, the 6 heart virtues, the quantum pause and more, which I feel strongly is very valid. I also took to heart the information about the central race and the Lyricus teaching order, although perhaps not all of it. But again, like the Guardian Alliance, who are speaking through a Cheyenne Dean and He Voyagers series say, the people working on the Wingmakers project are usually unaware of whom is behind it, and their real agenda. Deanne, 2002, Voyagers 2, 2nd edition, pages 550. Again, this will be covered in much more details in a forthcoming paper. Then, in 2008, James was interviewed by Carrie Cassidy and Bill Ryan of Project Camelot, and that interview was a jaw-dropper. Here James changed direction quite drastically and painted a very disturbing and dark picture of the reality we live in. As I mentioned earlier in this paper under the Wingmakers section, he explained how solidly we are trapped in the third dimension, which was totally created by a creator god, and you of the Anunnaki back in old Atlantis. By creating a complex genetic manipulation system, as he calls it, he had all these free spirits trapped into matter, and they forgot who they were. In addition, Anu also had to be in control over the spirit world and the afterlife. James continues by saying that all channeled material comes from within what he calls the human mind system, HMS, which in other words is a news universe. As long as there is thought involved, it's coming from within the trap. Beings can claim they are interdimensional, of higher densities or whatnot, but they are still trapped in a news universe. When this interview was first released, I took most of it to heart, although I had certain doubts about the clone universe. James said that this artificial universe is inhabited only by humans, there are no other alien species. He adds that other life forms do exist, but they come from outside a news matrix system and can only stay here for a while, or they will either perish or get stuck here, which has happened. There is no doubt that this universe is inhabited by an abundance of different life forms. See my physics paper number 2, Known Life Forms Within the Milky Way and Beyond, sections 2 and 2.1. In the last year, I have read up a lot on what is out there, and it is pretty astounding what some humans know, which is also not well established in the UFO research circles. Much of it has been suppressed, of course, due to the nature of the information, but some of it is also pretty advanced. A very good start is the free ebook, Alien Mind by George Lobuono. It will take you on a ride you have not been even close to before. It will make you understand how aliens think, how widespread they are throughout the multiverse, where they come from, how they are connected to us humans, and why. It's hard to even begin to understand the alien phenomenon without having read that book. The fact that we have been contacted big time by aliens, both physical and hyperversal, entities who either exist interdimensionally without a body, or can transfer a body over long distances in space and time, is evident, and it contradicts parts of James' story without any doubts. Although I believe part of that interview is true, it shows that James has a hidden agenda, something I did not perceive in his earlier material. I will show some evidence that the Wingmaker's site has been taken over by a certain ET force, and the originator of the Wingmaker's material was replaced by this mysterious James, not so mysterious anymore, which I will show. The question is, what happened to the originator of the first site? According to members of the LPGC, Life Physics Group California, a human mind system of a kind James is describing in the Camelot interview is not possible to make, either, because physics simply doesn't work that way. Still, I wouldn't discard the Wingmaker's material that easily. There is a lot of useful information in there, especially from the early material, but also the breathing exercises, and the heart virtues. Again, it's a matter of not throwing the baby out and learn how to discern good information from the bad. But if James' claim that we're stuck in a clone universe falls apart, so does also his afterlife theory. At best it is disinformation and still has some truth to it, but not the way he describes it. 5.3 David and the Moon Matrix Revisited. I have always found David and his work fascinating. I have followed him on and off since his book The Robots' Rebellion was released in the earlier parts of the 1990s. I read it at the same time as I read The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, and William Cooper's Behold a White Horse. I believe K has done a lot to reveal things that are going on behind the scenes, and his solutions are often right on. I am even ready to adopt his reptilian theories to a great extent. Back to the Moon Matrix. When I read K's book on the subject I found it very intriguing and possibly true. If it's true that the reptilian hyperversals K is talking about are creating a reality by holograms projected from the moon and thus keep us in a time loop, the same entities could possibly also be in charge of the Earth's astral planes. I am surprised that K hasn't made that connection, but on the other hand, perhaps he is working on that in his next book. The experiences Dr. Newton's subjects have had could then be part of the programming, and the subjects would never know. They will all simply tell the truth from how they experience their afterlife. They are unable to penetrate the hologram, because they are not even aware of that it exists. 5.4 Leaders. Ron Hubbard and Robert Morningsky. I have no doubts that L. Ron Hubbard, LRH Hash, had inside information. A lot of former Scientologists who have left the church have become powerful whistleblowers, and quite a few of them worked close to, or even together with, LRH Hash. Many of them, in addition to researcher and author, Russell Miller, who wrote the book, Barefaced Messiah, The True Story of L. Ron Hubbard, are saying that LRH once worked for Navy intelligence, something the church eventually had to admit in 1969, although their version is that he did so to be able to destroy evil secret societies like the Otto Pasadena Lodge in California, run by Jack Parsons in the 1940s, by infiltrating them. What they failed to tell us is that the Otto, at that time run by the British intelligence officer, and spy, Aleister Crowley, and many other secret societies already were part of the intelligence community. LRH certainly ran that lodge down by allegedly stealing both Parsons' girlfriend and his yacht, and also got away with some of Parsons' money. Jack Parsons, who was a well-known scientist, eventually blew himself up accidentally in his laboratory. Still, LRH refers to both Aleister Crowley and John Whitesides Parsons as his dear friends in Scientology lectures and a policy letter from the late 1950s. I also got confirmed by researcher Bill Cooper in person in 2001 that Scientology is a Navy intelligence project which went beyond any expectations. Bill, himself a former Navy intelligence officer, was shot to death by Arizona police outside his home shortly after. I'd like to look at the research of L. Ron Hubbard and Robert Morning Sky side by side. Although Hubbard never mentions the Greys per se, but Morning Sky does, the invaders' force could be one and the same. If there is something about the negative afterlife experiences I may consider having some truth to it, it would be the Grey agenda. Again, I need to emphasize that we're here talking about not all Greys, but the faction that is abducting us and manipulating our genes without our direct consent. Hubbard is going into some details about how these implants are being done, which I find quite interesting, plus that he is mentioning Mars as an implant station together with the Pyrenees. Both the Pleiadians, Robert Morning Sky and many others, including Sitchin, have mentioned lately that Mars has long been used for genetic engineering and is inhabited, or at least was until very recently. Hubbard could have made Mars up in his imagination, and this is of course possible, but if so, there are a lot of things Hubbard made up in his imagination, which later showed to be true. I believe Hubbard had some real inside information, or perhaps he gained some of his information from early versions of remote viewing. After all, the OT levels in Scientology are to a large degree about remote viewing, and many famous remote viewers, like Putnam and Ingo Swann, were OT3 Scientologists of the old school. Robert Morning Sky, like Hubbard, had some serious critics. Morning Sky had his share in the late 1990s. He was so heavily criticized that he decided to withdraw from public appearances and thus disappeared from the scene for over 10 years, until just recently, when he was interviewed on the Veritas show. Worth listening to as well, is an interview from 1996 called Star Elders. But by now we know how it works. If you really want to bring somebody down or out of business, so to speak, all you have to do is to consistently and persistently point out the things that are wrong, magnify the errors out of proportion, and then suggest that it is all disinformation. If we fall for that, we're on an unproductive journey. No one will tell you the whole truth about anything. We have to figure it out for ourselves by picking a gem here and a gem there and sort them by colors, figuratively speaking. I believe Morning Sky did a good job with what he had available when researching about our ancestors, the Anunnaki and the Orion reptilians. Much of the information supposedly came from a star visitor his Hopi forefathers saved from a UFO crash, but Robert also did his own research to put things together. He is telling a pretty interesting story in the Terra Papers, particularly about the time before the Anunnaki, the Orions and the Greys came to Earth. He is going back in time and deep digs into the Anunnaki royal bloodline, going back way before King Anu. When scrutinizing his work as a whole and compare it to more recent, consistent sources, not everything Morning Sky was telling us holds water, but I am happy to have read him and listened to him, because he has a lot to teach us so we can be able to put these very confusing subjects on UFOs and aliens into perspective. It's not getting easier as government disinformation agents are coming out and muddle the water. I have no solid proof to present about the Greys being the invader force, implanting us and keeping us ignorant between lives, in spite of what other researchers have claimed. The only solid evidence I have is what Dr. Newton has given us through his research. We may, and should, speculate if there is more to it, and here are some questions we need to have answered. Although most people's experiences from the afterlife are pleasant, is there a force controlling time, space? If so, is that force benevolent or malevolent? Is the positive experiences just a way to keep us attached to a matrix system which is controlled by alien beings with a not so benevolent agenda? Some sources, like the Pleiadians, say that we go wherever our beliefs take us after we die. If we believe we go to hell, something corresponding to our belief system is going to manifest. If we believe in heaven, we will experience something similar to that. Therefore, it's very important to decide where we want to go, and what to experience. This makes sense on some level, although it looks like almost all of Dr. Newton's subjects go to the same, or a similar place. Quite a few of Dr. Newton's subjects describe time, space as being curved, which indicates that it's a sphere, and therefore finite. What exactly is this sphere? Before I end this paper, I want to address Edgar Cayce and the rest of the witnesses as well. 5.5 The Edgar Cayce section revisited. Those mentioned in the Edgar Cayce section, 4.5, are not contradicting Dr. Newton, but are just adding things to the picture. We need to remember that any experience a person may have is subjective and viewed from that person's perspective. Then, when describing the experience to the rest of us by using words, something always gets lost or distorted on the way. This is mainly because we still don't have a sufficient language to describe these phenomena. Two people who experience the exact same thing may feel different about it, very different even, and may still have been to an identical place. The following facts remain. We are under severe mind control here in the third density, making it possible for more than one alien race to control the whole human population. This is not new. We have been manipulated for thousands of years. On a higher soul level, we are aware of this, but agree to experience, learn from, and expand ourselves in this lower frequency consciousness and now take advantage of the higher levels of energy coming in from cosmos to finally have the opportunity to graduate from this reality. There is overwhelming evidence that the above is true, and this means that the spirit world must have been adjusted to the 3D reality. We need a rest place in between lives, and we got it. We are patched up to be able to fulfill our mission, and ETs from many walks in life out in the universe are curiously watching us breaking out from the prison. Once we are becoming aware of ourselves as multidimensional beings, there is no longer any use for the afterlife as we know it. As multidimensional beings we can access the sitter space at will whenever we want to anyway. So, looking at this whole thing from this higher, multidimensional perspective, makes it all make more sense. Bottom line is, when you're pure spirit, unattached to a heavy 3D body and no longer trapped in a low frequency reality, what are you? You are pure energy, unconditional love and in tune with all that is, God on a subquantum level. This is also what most people seem to experience when they leave the earth plane after their body vehicle stops functioning. Then you're drawn towards a tunnel of light with a force that seems hard to resist. As a matter of fact, few have any wish to resist it, either, because they feel so good. Some say that they can see 1,000 years into the past and 1,000 years into the future, it all exists simultaneously. The open question is, what is this tunnel of light which apparently takes you to a spherical time, space that obviously is finite if it's spherical? Because of Michael Newton's research we know pretty well what happens on the other side of the tunnel, but we don't know who is in charge of the afterlife. Pure spirit, meeting relatives and soul groups feeling a tremendous amount of love for everybody and everything in that sense afterlife seems benevolent enough. However, and I am not trying to play the devil's advocate here, could it be that the afterlife is still controlled by the same forces who control our third density, aka the Anunnaki and the reptilians? Could it be that they trap pure spirits, full of love but naive in their new native state, by forcing us into this tunnel? On the other side of the tunnel is another hologram, they just exchange one holographic reality for another? It's fine to be benevolent as long as they know they can shoot us back down into a body again, because that's what spirit is programmed to do, go back into third density again. This argument could be groundless, but I can't help but being suspicious about the tunnel. Who is in control? And who are the members of the council? Who is above them? The mindful may ask themselves, what about life on other planets then? Aren't we living different lives on different planets? The answer is most certainly, yes. However, and this will be explained in another paper, the oversoul is fragmented into smaller soul fragments, where each fragment is incarnated on different planets and in different space, time. When this is understood, my concerns above make more sense. Therefore, I suggest you go back to this paper once you're read up on the rest.